but I'm fully bilingual. Please feel free to ask your questions in the chat in French. I will answer in French. And if there's anything that's not clear, please feel free to ask me anything. Okay, so I will share my presentation. Okay, so today we're going to talk about assessing biodiversity as a tool for protecting natural spaces. I see that a lot of you already know that very well, but we can get into a little bit of the nitty gritty. But before I start, I would like to acknowledge that we are on unceded Kanien'kehá:ka territory. Montreal was used in history as a meeting place for many Indigenous peoples. And I really would like to encourage you to learn about all of these Indigenous peoples, including the Kanien'kehá:ka peoples. I also want to thank the Legacy Fund for the Environment for inviting us this evening to talk about our work, and for all of you for showing up. So I want to start by saying that I think some of you or most of you here know already, you have the power. You have the power. Citizens, as you know, have become the voice and the custodians of nature. Our governments, our laws are in place to protect the environment, but they're not doing a very good job, unfortunately. And so it has fallen on the shoulders of citizens, and with a lot of success. So it really is a tremendous accomplishment. And so the tools are there for you, including the Legacy Fund for the Environment and the tools that we're going to talk about this evening. This is a picture of just before the march started in Montreal 2019. And, that was showing this incredible power that people have to speak about what is happening today. And we are really, I don't need to preach to the choir here, but we're really at a crossroads. We're at a critical point in our history, and we can all do something about it. So inevitably, when your mind wanders this evening throughout the talk, maybe it can wander to thinking about, what is my unique gift? What can I bring to the table? And then who can I partner with to save the oceans, save the forest down the street, save that species that's going extinct? Whatever it is, you have the power to do so. Okay, so tonight I want to talk about citizen advocacy and how it can work. Biodiversity itself, I think a lot of you probably already know what it is, but we'll just go a little bit over it and its current state. How development projects get accepted here in Quebec, a very brief overview. How our work at Terra Humana Solutions comes into that, and then we're going to talk about examples, so case studies. And a lot of you here in the webinar are part of those case studies, so I'm super excited. So this is my pie analogy about the components or the elements of a citizen-led conservation initiative. So you'll see that it changes over time. It's a pie, and it's got pieces, and the pieces of the pie represent the different components. So at the very beginning, a big component is the citizen advocacy. So I'm putting 50% here. That's just, sort of random numbers, but just to show that it's important. And then the ecological characterization, the technical report, the environmental study, whatever you want to call it, the biodiversity study, is equally important because it provides data that will show your constituents, etc., the ecological value of the area that is, in many cases, targeted for development. Funding is a big part of that pie too, because you need funds to fund the ecological characterization and other activities that are involved. And then the legal counsel at this point is important, but it's on standby. So I put it just as a small piece of the pie. And then you see over time, once the ecological characterization, I'm sorry, my dog decided to chew on his bone at this moment. Once the ecological characterization, the report has been submitted, there's a big push from the citizen advocacy side. Then that takes less of an importance, right? Then the legal counsel comes into play. So this is when often things are taken to court with the ecological characterization and other things that are, petitions, whatever that the citizens could gather are deposited and to fight the fight. So just very briefly, we all know about biodiversity, but I think here at this webinar, but it's surprising how many people I meet don't know what biodiversity is. And it's not just the amount of birds or mammals that are in a forest, say, it really is the variability of life at all levels, at the genetic level, the species level, and the ecosystem level. And at the ecosystem level, we find the terrestrial, the marine, and the other aquatic ecosystems. And biodiversity really is the sustenance of life. It regulates the chemistry of atmosphere and the water. It purifies the water, it recycles nutrients, and then at a very local level, it keeps you alive. So all of the bacteria, the microbial community in your body is doing 100 million things to digest, to keep you thin, to keep you not thin, to whatever it is, to keep you healthy. It even has been linked to mental health issues. So diversity at all levels sustains life. And just a side note, I was watching 60 Minutes last night. I don't know if you watched it, but they were talking about sloths. And there's a fantastic woman who's an advocate for sloths and how they represent that life living slowly is a life worth living. And it was a fantastic story. And she was talking about how climate change is affecting the microbial community in the sloths, which is super important for their survival because they eat these very toxic plants. And that's why they're so slow, because they need to digest these plants. So that brings me to the next thing. What is happening to biodiversity? Well, we all know there's many reports that have come out recently and not so recently, showing that we are seeing a drastic decline in the diversity of life. This is the World Wildlife Fund Living Planet report. This only looks at vertebrates. Okay, so they've been using something called the Living Planet Index since the 1970s. And with that, they track a number of populations from mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, and amphibians. Okay, so this doesn't count for plants or insects or the microbial communities that I was talking about. Nevertheless, it shows a big picture. And it's alarming because if we're seeing a decline in biodiversity at that level, we are certainly seeing a decline in biodiversity at the more microbial or the finer levels. So they revealed a 69% decrease in the monitored wildlife populations and since the 1970s. And as you know, UN in 2022, their report came out basically saying the same thing, very alarming rates of decline in biodiversity. And they quote, the planet's life support systems are at stake. So why is biodiversity declining? Well, there are 5 main factors that were identified in the World Wildlife Fund report. One of them is changing use of sea and land. And I have that highlighted because this is where development comes in. Habitat loss is one of the major factors in species decline. You also find direct exploitation of organisms, climate change, pollution, invasive of non-native species, and then all these factors interact each other, like my sloth example. Climate change, microbial community. You also have the invasive non-native species. An example of that is the fires in Hawaii. They're very present in Hawaii and they're very flammable. So they contributed to that inflammatory process that happened while the fires just, burned like crazy in Hawaii. So what's happening here in Canada? Well, something very interesting. In their 2017 report, because this is when all this came out too, World Wildlife Fund came out with a 2017 report that showed these alarming rates of decline, and so did World Wildlife Fund Canada. And in this report, what was interesting is that they showed that the species at risk that are protected under SARA, so SARA is the Species at Risk Act, which is a federal legislation, that was put into place in 2002 continued to decline. So this is the graph that's showing their decline until 2002. Okay, so so then some species are determined threatened or endangered or susceptible to be by the COSEWIC, which is the Committee for the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada, or COSEPAC en français. So then this law came into place, and lo and behold, the decline kept happening. In fact, it was an average annual decline of 2.7%. And so the results suggested that the decline of these at-risk species may have increased despite their protection. And so when I read that, I fell off my chair. I didn't know what was happening. I thought, and we do, Canada and Quebec has very progressive, very sophisticated laws that are there to protect our environment, but they're just not working very well. I don't want to, we talk about the environment as this separate entity and nature a separate entity, but we all know it's one, right? The environment is the air I breathe, but it's also my backyard or the forest and nature, we're nature. So it's one. And so I think that's also part of the problem, that we need to kind of stop thinking about that. So, I can't for some, here we go. Okay. So this is a good segue to kind of briefly going over how projects are approved in Quebec. If you're a developer, you look to see under the section 22 of the Loi sur la qualité de l'environnement, LQE, and there's the new RAFI. I think some of you may know about that. It's a new regulation, le règlement sur l'encadrement d'activités en fonction de leur impact sur l'environnement, RAFI, which is slowly being put into place. These kind of dictate the conditions in which you need or not to apply for a certificate of authorization. Okay, I know a lot of you know this already. So if the conditions are such, for example, you want to build on a wetland, you need a certificate of authorization. And then you submit a form. It's all done online, and it has to be accompanied by an ecological characterization, an environmental study, etc. Then this is deposited to the MESCC FP. So as you know, it used to be the MESCC, le ministère de l'Environnement, de la lutte contre les changements climatiques, and now it got amalgamated with the Faune et des Parcs. So it used to be le ministère des Forêts, de la Faune et des Parcs, and now that got put into the MESCC FP. And as we found out very recently, that very rarely are these certificate of authorizations refused. So the Green Coalition, in a court case in, I think, was it before 2020? But I know the Legacy Fund for the Environment had a webinar on this in 2020. But under oath, a staff representative from the MESCC at the time said that certificate of authorizations were never refused. So if there was a problem, they would just help to facilitate the process to get the certificate of authorization. So bing, reality check. This is why, in part, we are losing species at risk, because even if there is the presence of species at risk, these certificates are being issued and developments are allowed to happen. It is unfathomable to me. And I'm sorry okay, here we go. So this brings us to our work and how it could be used as a tool for citizens groups who wish to protect natural spaces. So I'll explain a little bit about our approach, who's our team, and then I'm going to start talking about case studies. So we are a group of scientists. Some of us have PhDs, masters, some of us are students, and we use our scientific knowledge to critically review all available documentation that were obtained by yourselves, by the citizens. So you see this, you really are the fuel to all of this. And this includes the environmental study mandated by the developer. Often, I would say almost 100% of the time, one needs to go through the Access to Information Act to get these studies. Unfortunately, they are not readily given and they are not publicly accessible. Secondly, we will search for through existing databases on the flora and the fauna observed and what could be potentially present in what we call the study area. So that's the area that is targeted for development and the one that we will be studying. So we use Centre de données sur le patrimoine naturel du Québec, iNaturalist, which is a citizen science-based tool to submit observations, plants, birds, everything. And then you have eBird, which is run by Cornell University, which is really just for birds. It's a fantastic tool. So with this, then we go do field inventories to either determine whether or not the presence of these species is indeed there. And we use accepted protocols and methodologies to carry these out. And then we write a full report of our findings. And then the data is submitted to both the federal and the provincial ministries. Of course, mostly the species at risk that we found there are submitted to the provincial ministries. And we also submit it to the Centre de données sur le patrimoine naturel du Québec. So our core team is Dr. Patrick Gallois, who is a PhD from McGill, and we've known each other since we were students there. He is a specialist in herpetofauna, so that's amphibians and reptiles. Marion McNair, who has a master's from McGill in plant science. She's our flora and insect expert. And myself, I focus on the avifauna, so the birds, and the chiroptera, the bats. And our extended team includes Gabi Edney, who's a PhD student now at Ottawa U. She analyzes the data on bats because we use passive methods to record echolocation calls. Alison Hackney, who is a fantastic birder who helps us with the birds. And then we've had a number of students throughout the years help us out. Cher Gruber, Tiffany Vanou, and Dylan Gwilliam, who did a fantastic a documentary in Hudson that I think some of you may have seen, and Emma Gillies, who was like my first student working with me in Hudson at the time. So our field inventories include, like I said, they use the appropriate methodologies and protocol to do both active and passive inventories. The active inventories are on site and they include the plant, the birds, the amphibians, and reptiles. And also we use passive methodologies where we have recorders that record both acoustic and ultrasonic recordings. So the ultrasonic is for bats. So as you know, bats emit echolocation calls that are not audible to the human ear. And apparently other animals emit sounds that are not audible to the ears. I don't know if you knew, but mouse sing, but we can't hear it. So I got to find out how we can record that too. And then the acoustic sounds is amazing because you can set that to start an hour and a half before sunrise and then at dusk. And so it really is an amazing opportunity to be an observer without being there. So removing the human presence, and then we can later listen to these and identify the birds and the bats using analytical tools. Okay, so I'm going to move into the case studies. I want to focus on 3 case studies in particular. The first is Rousseau Forest in Pincourt. That's where we found our beginnings. The second is in Saint-Joseph-du-Lac. I see Sylvie is here. And then Sandy Beach and Hudson, I see some representatives are there as well. We're also currently working on some other dossiers that I won't talk about because they're still ongoing. And so some of this information is sensitive. But I can say that interestingly, we were contacted by a citizen who wishes to have his own property be like a conserved area. So he wanted the inventories to be done as the land around him is being eaten away by sand quarries. Okay, so yes, it all starts in Pincourt. So Pincourt Val were our very first clients. I have this. This is an interesting tool that you can use. It's Google Earth, and you can look at the land use changes over time. And I think this is such an amazing look at what happened to Pincourt in only 5 years. So in 2002, if you see up here, this is largely forest cover. And then just 5 years later, you have this chunk here that's left, and then Rousseau Forest, which is here. So you see it in bigger format here. It's along the Ottawa River. It's a 4.2 hectare forested wetland, sorry, that was targeted to build 45 single family homes. And the certificate of authorization, which I will refer to as CA, was obtained in 2017. The developer mandated a study by Grebe in 2016, where no species were reported, no species at risk were reported, and this was based on only 2 visits in April and August. And I forgot to say that field inventories are crucially important in the spring and summer. So ideally, you want to do it in 1 year. And then even more ideally, you want to do it over 5 years, but often we only have a year or, like a season. So we do it from spring to fall, with spring and summer, early summer being crucial. And in fact, all of the methodologies and protocols ask that the inventories are done in that period of time. So April and August will only give you a tiny little bit of the species that are there. So in 2018, a group of citizens that weren't yet completely formed and led by Sheila McNally and Carol Reed mandated a biodiversity study that was conducted by us and also with the help of Kyle, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name, who was not affiliated with Terra Humana Solutions and was a fantastic plant expert and helped to delimitate the wetlands that were in the forest. We started late because we got called on like in July. So the inventories were conducted from July to September, which is not ideal, but still in that time, there was a big difference with what Grebe had reported. We found 96 plants, Kyle found 96 plants, and we also inventoried 26 fauna species in just 3 months. And these included 8 species at risk. So this was presented to the council and to the mayor by Pincourt Val, which I think at that point had been officially formed. And then the city of Pincourt decided that our report was biased because it was mandated by citizens. And so they mandated their own report by WSP, who did a fantastic job. And of course, they had the means to do it. It was a lot bigger study with a lot more funds. But they discovered 7 flora and the same that we had identified, and 5 fauna species that were at risk. One of the species that we had identified, and this was our very first time using our passive recorders, was the little brown myotis, which is it is a critically endangered species. All bats actually are not doing well in Quebec and in Canada and worldwide. So this is a success story. In 2022, as many of you know, the city bought the woodlot, and it is a conserved area today. And the town now is leading cleaning expeditions with Pincourt Vert, and so it's a really beautiful story. Moving on to Nature and Hudson and Nature Hudson, we worked on 2 mandates, Willowbrook and Sandy Beach, but I want to focus more on Sandy Beach this evening. So this is a larger map up here that shows where Sandy Beach is along the Ottawa River. And this is the map that Marion created for our report that we submitted The blue lines delimit the property outlined by the developer. And you can see it's smack dab in the wetlands. So the hash green are the wetlands, and these blue things are called vernal ponds. They are understated and understudied ecosystems. And if you want to know more about those, ask David Fletcher. He is very knowledgeable. But they are incredibly diverse ecosystems that do not get enough attention. So Sandy Beach is about 10 hectare forested wetland, which again was targeted for a residential development. AECOM TechSalt was the consulting firm that was mandated by the developer to conduct a study. They reported no species at risk and that it was not an ecologically valuable forest, essentially. So this certificate of authorization was given in 2014, but the project lay dormant. And Nature Hudson reached out to us in 2021. We conducted a biodiversity study where Marion McNair was the lead on this. And she was amazing. I mean, she'll just crawl on the ground and run after insects and do everything like that to identify all of the species that are in these forests. So in the end, we identified 354 species of flora and fauna. These included 13 species at risk. So this is a stark difference from what the developers' study had reported. Some of these species include the fraternal potter wasp, which is seen making its potter. It really looks like a clay pot nest. And then I think most notably, Marion found the toothed bittercress, which is so rare in Quebec that it's not listed. And here is Frida Beauregard, who was from McGill, who had to come and see for herself. And so that was an incredible find. The northern map turtle was identified by Patrick, and then Allison actually inventoried the wood thrush, which is an endangered species. So it pays to spend a little bit more time. And we also determined the forest could qualify for what is called an exceptional forest ecosystem. And these exceptional forest ecosystems are, they're generally awarded to smaller forested areas in different categories, including rare forests, old growth forests, and also what is called the shelter forests. And this fell under the shelter forest because it housed either threatened or vulnerable species, of which there were. Of course, this is, I think, mostly limited to plant species, but we had quite a bit of plant species that were vulnerable or species at risk. And the Quebec Sustainable Forest Development Act stipulates that all forests that fall under this category, that development activities are prohibited in these EFEs for short. So I see there's some, should we just leave the questions? There's some chat or questions in the chat. We should probably leave these for the end. Is that correct?
Yeah, let's leave the questions until the end.
Okay, thank you. So the efforts here prompted a moratorium on the development in Hudson for 90 days until they could really start to assess what areas they needed to conserve in the town. And in 2023, Quebec revoked the certificate of authorization. And I think there have been newer developments since then that I haven't followed, but perhaps those of you that are online today can maybe update us on that if you wish to do so. The final case study that I want to talk about is Regarde Citoyen, which is a group in the area of Saint-Joseph-du-Lac. This was a 26.4 hectare forested wetland. So you've noticed these are all forested wetlands along the 640 that again was targeted for residential development. This is an aerial photo of the area that was taken by La Presse photographer. And this is a map that we had created, I believe, with the outline of the development and showing the different wetlands. So in July 2009 and September 2017, the first environmental studies were conducted that were mandated by the developer, and they were conducted by Horizon Multiresources. They reported only one plant species at risk, and it was under the category of vulnérable à la récolte, which is not really legally protected. It's just susceptible to declining as a result of illegal, or not illegal, but of harvesting, excessive harvesting. So late in the season, we were asked in 2021 to go take a look at the forest and see if there was anything that we could do to help. And in only one visit, we identified 2 tree species that were at risk, that were obviously there in 2009 and 2017 because they were very mature trees. So we're not sure, and they're quite easy to identify. So we're not sure why they were missed in the first studies. And then in 2021, in 2021, then the developer mandated a second study by Stantec, which again concluded there was no species at risk present. So we went back in 2022, and our study revealed, this time we did it from the spring to fall, and we revealed 242 species of flora and fauna. 33 were at risk, including 23 plants and 10 fauna. So some of the plants included the trees we saw before, and the fauna, some of them again, the little brown myotis and the eastern wood pewee, which is a migratory bird. However, it doesn't end well. Despite this, the certificate of authorization was granted in 2022, and the clear cutting began in January 2023. And this led to a protest by the citizens group, a quiet protest, to show their discontent. All of this work was really well put together, and other following articles by Éric Pierre Champagne in La Presse in March 2023. And we couldn't have asked for anything better because it was really well done. He gave the opportunity to all of the other consulting firms that were mandated by the developer to say a word or two, but none replied or answered a call for an explanation. So in all, when we compare our biodiversity studies to the ones that were mandated by the developers, we only have 4, right? But in 4 out of 4, we see the following big lines. They were conducted at the wrong time of year. They didn't use the appropriate methodologies or protocols. They reported none or much less species at risk than we did. And also, what I didn't talk about is we also delimited wetlands using appropriate protocols. And in all cases, the wetlands were much smaller in size than the developer studies reported wetlands much smaller in size than what we were able to assess. So our government is granting certificate of authorizations based on these erroneous studies and using poor science. It's embarrassing. So how can you get involved? Again, I think I'm preaching to the choir because a lot of you are all already super involved, but you can pass the word. Like I said, maybe you had a chance to think about your unique talent to bring to the table, find like-minded friends and colleagues, reach out to us and or the Legacy Fund for the Environment. We can help strategize to find funding, and then let your elected officials know that you want these areas protected. In 2023, this cannot be happening anymore. Okay, so I just want to leave you, this is my last slide, and I want to leave you with this thought and a bit of sound that goes with it. But we're talking a lot about artificial intelligence these days, and I want to talk about nature's intelligence. If we come back to the sloth example, this is a species that is 60 million years old. It is a species that has gone through innumerable changes and has adapted to its environment, right? That's the crux of evolution. Birds are 150 million years old. Insects are even older, and trees and so on. And we're starting to like, we know so little. We're starting to find out how trees communicate with fungi, under the ground and through their roots, and they send each other medicine. There's a great New York Times article about all of the communications that animals have that we can't hear. Just listen to a bird, and I think we probably understand like 0.3% of what we're hearing. So nature's intelligence is there. It's been there for a gazillion years, billions of years, and it will come back. Given a chance. It's extremely resilient, but the pace, as you all know, the pace of change now is very fast, and so and all these factors are exacerbating each other, and so it's making it very difficult. But it's there. The intelligence is there. So instead of artificial intelligence, let's talk about nature's intelligence. And I want you to listen to just 30 seconds of a recording we took. This was our passive recorder at 4:40 a.m. in a forest near you. This is a project we're working on currently. And just listen for a moment. So this was an American redstart, and you can hear the hum of the traffic in the background, but you still hear this whole discussion and the life that is happening in this forest that is unfortunately targeted for development. And so, I really hope that we can move forward and convince everyone that we need to stop. This. So. Miawa, merci, thank you for being here. Thank you so much to the Legacy Fund and the Environment. Bird Protection Quebec has funded part of these studies. Eco Canada and the United Nations Association in Canada also helped us pay for students that worked with us. So, and we want to thank all of the volunteers that helped us out as well.
Thank you so much, Isabel. I think that all developers should be required to go stand in their area at 4:40 in the morning and just listen. All right, Dita, if you'd like to take over.
Yes, I'd love to, but our tech support has turned off my camera because I was wandering around by mistake. I didn't know I was on screen. Hi.
There you are.
Wow. Okay, so I apologize for moving around on the screen. I apologize for that, but it was fantastic, Isabel. I really learned a lot, and I really enjoyed listening to you tremendously. And I have to say this from the start: your visuals are amazing. I think everyone would agree to that. Your the presentation, the PowerPoint, the visuals it's just very, very enriching and very enlightening. I have a legal perspective, and I have a question, but I will reserve it for now, because as I was listening to you, I immediately went to the Environmental Quality Act and started searching as well for a possible answer to my question. But I see there's a lot of questions on the chat, so I will ask those first. And I think there's a kind of a technical kind of, let's say, point of order correction that someone wants to make. I believe it's Rob. I believe it must be Rob from the Sandy Beach group. And because I only see his name Rob, but he wants to make a correction. He says the certificate of authorization has not been revoked. The minister announced on July 28th that he intended to cancel the certificate of authorization, but he has not done so yet. And that's really shocking because according to what you presented, there's 354 species at risk. Was that a number that
It was
thought-
354 species we inventoried in
Right.
total.
Okay,
And 13 of them were at risk.
13 are at risk. Okay.
Yeah, and thank you
Exactly.
Rob, for that clarification. I got
Yeah.
very confused with the subsequent back and forth with the certificate.
Yes, there's a whole long story to that, and it's only 7:15, and maybe we'll have a chance. Maybe Rob can come on and he can give us a little update. Feel free to turn on your cameras and so that we can see you all. Now, I also have a question here. Basic question. I'm just going to go. Hi, Rob. I'm going to go to the top. These are questions actually that came from Campbell right from the get-go, and I think they're still quite valid even after having listened to your presentation. Could you please describe the most egregious example of misrepresentation you have seen from a developer? Hang on. Oh, I lost the question now. Sorry for that. But is there some example that jumps out at you?
Oh gosh. All of the above.
All of the above. So I'm referring to the question that's right at the top of the chat.
Yeah.
What are the most surprising results you have found in doing biodiversity studies?
This is unprecedented. We never had a comparison between biodiversity is done properly, and it is not a tap on the back for us. I mean, anybody who has the training and follows the protocols, but this is unprecedented where we can actually have these studies and compare them to the studies that were mandated by the developer. So just to find to have that statement of no species at risk were found, and then to me, the example of Saint-Joseph-du-Lac, we walked in and Marion, literally within an hour, was like, oh, there's 2 tree species that are at risk, and they're huge trees, and they're much older than 2009. So clearly the work wasn't done appropriately.
So how far back have you gone? Have you had an opportunity to go back to others to studies that have been done, not that you have contested, but that have been done where you were surprised at the results?
Yeah, way back when we did a little bit of work on the Le Terrain Golf in Dorval. And we had the opportunity to look at some, so we weren't involved like this. We didn't do a study per se.
Right.
It was, I think we went in one day. It was much lighter. It was very different. But the environmental study that was submitted to the minister was horrible. It really looked like somebody that didn't know anything about biology sat at their desk and wrote a 2-pager. Said there was no waterways when there's clearly a waterway, that the trees were very young, and we found trees that were a lot older.
Right, but how does that, but that leads to the next question, and I don't want to, but it leads actually to the question that was triggered in my mind when you first started. How is the certificate of authorization actually triggered? I mean, how does the minister know that he has to give a certificate, or how does the developer know that they have to get a certificate?
That's a very good question.
Because the water, there's one section in there that I see in the law that talks about in 22 it says it's a waterway, right? It's but how do you know that even on a golf course, it doesn't have to be a wetland, but you could ask for a certificate of authorization? That's my question.
Yes. So exactly, it's all stipulated under the Article 22 of the Loi sur la qualité de l'environnement. And to be honest, there are people who know much more, about this than I do. But if you have, the conditions are pretty much listed online. So if your development project, falls under the following project types, you want to build a new dump site, you want to
Okay.
build something where, so these
A
conditions.
golf Dorval would qualify for a certificate. Would they would need a certificate of authorization, or it's because it's part of the techno park?
That's a good question, and I'm sorry
Okay.
I brought that up
Okay.
because it's very
Okay.
far back in
Yeah,
my.
we have to dig deeper. I get it.
I'd have to dig deeper, but there was, and again, maybe some people who remember more clearly than me could pipe in, but we didn't work very much on that particular dossier. So I'm clear on the other ones where we were able to, we were privy to the forms that were filled out by the developer. And the form is, pretty much check off the boxes. Est-ce qu'il y a des espèces à statut présentes sur, in the study area? And then you check yes or no, and then list or not, whatever. And then in the end, this is also the report that is the environmental study is attached to that. And then we were also able to see a lot of the back and forth between the MESCC and the developer. Well, what do you mean at this page? And well, can you explain in this? And how are you going to mitigate this? But really, it's a process of mitigating and facilitating, because in the end, their certificate of authorization is given. But they do read the reports, they ask questions, and they ask for clarifications. And sometimes this can last quite a bit of time. Does that answer the question?
More or less, yes. I think it's a fascinating field. I think Norm wants to ask a question, and I think I'm going to let him, but I don't know. Can you unmute yourself, Norm? Just identify yourself and unmute yourself.
With all the study that you do, Isabelle, and comparing with the existing that was done by the promoter, why we cannot do a case against the Ministère de l'Environnement and that proving that most of the promoter, they don't give the right position, and I think you got a couple of cases that was done, and from there we just make a
Well,
case.
that's on a case-by-case basis, right? You can't do it.
But you have like 4 or 5 cases that they are similar, and where the promoter give a result, and you give another result, and it doesn't match.
I agree with you 100%. To be honest, I think it would be a worthwhile exercise. It's not something that we could lead, but we have the data. That's why data is very powerful. As I said, the La Presse article puts things extremely well together. He did his homework, and I think spoke to some of you. And then he followed it up with an article about whether or not there should be an ordre, that basically these environmental studies, including ours, should be reviewed by a third party. Just like any scientific paper that I submitted as an academic needs to be reviewed by reviewers that are specialized in this field. And so it's unacceptable to me that these studies are being submitted, and then these are presumably biologists at the ministry level that are accepting this. But worse to me is these consulting firms are biologists. They are registered under l'Association des biologistes du Québec, and they are putting these reports together. That it's just they don't stand on anything. So yes, but that's a question I think for all of us here, because really I see all of us are working towards this. So and that'd be awesome.
I think Campbell wants to come in on this subject. Yes, Campbell, go ahead.
Hi, and Isabelle, this is an amazing presentation. Thank you very, very much. I just wanted to say a couple of things. One is that the connection between the work being done by Terra Humanis Solutions and the Legacy Fund is a very important one, and I think it's worth, as Isabelle said I think in her last slide, where to go for help. Come to the Legacy Fund. We have over the years discovered that biodiversity studies are probably the most convincing pieces of evidence that one might want to put together, and as an organization that looks at the legal aspect of things, biodiversity studies are the feeding ground for legal intervention, along the lines of, by the way, Mr. the Minister, did you know that the people that are looking to get these certificates of authorizations have been lying to you? I hope nobody minds I use that term.
Mhm.
And that maybe you ought to look at the truth, and here is the truth. And I think that that's an extremely important thing. The history of the Legacy Fund over the years, since 2015, is that we have funded, in whole or in part, 11 biodiversity studies, and all of them have had a huge impact, including, for instance, ones that were done a long time ago in support of the preservation of the Lancelot. These things really, really matter. And what was mentioned during the presentation about the minister almost never turning down certificates of authorization, well, that was a statement made in open court while we tried to stop them from destroying the technopark. The witness for the Ministry of the Environment stood up and said, "Yeah, we never, we're pro-development. We never turn these things down. And if we're asked to, choose between environment and jobs, we'll choose jobs." So that there are really two elements. One is to embarrass the government on it, or to appeal to their better nature, which I think is also working. Certainly, what happened with the minister Charette and the Sandy Beach is an indication that they are intending on canceling it, and it's on the basis of the strength of the work that has been done here. And the other thing is that even if we don't talk about the minister, we talk about just simply the public, that these are incredibly powerful things to let the public know. People are looking at, they're afraid they're going to lose the local biodiversity in their area. Their wetlands going to disappear. Their place they've been going to the beach for over 100 years is going to disappear. If you want to win these battles, you have to win the hearts and minds of the public. And again, it is science that's going to do that. I apologize for rambling on here, but I really wanted to make the point that that biodiversity studies are incredibly important, no matter whether you're dealing with the government, with the municipality, with the public, with the press, however you want to put it. These are winning strategies, and so my feeling is that, okay, we're not taking anybody to court today, but if we're going to take somebody to court in the future, we need to do our homework, and this is our homework. This is the proof that what's going on, and it's also the proof that what the government is doing is outrageous. So that's the end of my rant. Thank you. It wasn't a question.
It was an excellent rant, very, very, comprehensive, Campbell, and we thank you. Obviously, you are the source and inspiration for this whole movement, so that's fantastic. Rob, do you want to jump in here? Because I could, no, you didn't want to say anything? Oui, Catherine, tout de suite après, Rob. You want to just identify yourself, Rob?
Yes, I'm here. I don't really have anything to add to what Campbell
Okay.
just said. Thank you.
I saw you nodding in approval, so that.
In approval, yes.
Thank you very much. Oui, Catherine, présente-toi. Oui. You're on mute, Catherine. Non, pas encore. Non, on t'entend pas.
No, she's it's not a mute problem, it's a microphone problem.
Oh, she has a microphone problem? Okay. Well, she might get to fix it. We'll bring her back when she has it. C'est correct? Non? Non. Dommage. Veux-tu écrire ta question dans le chat? Oui? Okay. So we had a few other questions that we wanted to ask. Are there enough people like you available to do these studies?
I'm on mute now. There are other firms that are doing that, notably Jérôme Duprat's firm that did the one for Lance Alarme. I think he's still doing that because he's still, I think he was interviewed in the La Presse article, and it was said that a lot of people still reach out to them. And then that's it.
Also, there's one more or one or two more in Quebec
that I know of. So if anybody else knows, I would love to find out. Love to
Very interesting.
collaborate.
And I'm going to say that the La Presse article is in the chat, and also there's a link to it in the chat, and also that your presentation is going to be on our website. I guess in a couple of days we'll post it, and we'll send an email to everyone sort of reminding them that they can go and take a look. And we did have one more question about what's called, this is a very interesting term, rubber boot science, and are educational institutions keeping up with the need to inspire and educate rubber boot scientists? You speak a little bit to that point.
So this is a term that really caught Campbell's attention. And as I was saying before, I mean, you know, a lot of people have been using it, but it was the dean of Princeton who had said to the head of the department of the evolutionary biology department that we need to move away from rubber boot biology, meaning we need to move away from the silly field studies and such that are going on, and we need to make sure that we do hard science that will bring us money, you know, and so on and so forth. And it was also, I think Harper was a big proponent of that, that universities had to become a lot more, you know, economically viable, more money generating, etc. And so unfortunately, a lot of these, you know, and as Marion had spoken to about as well, a lot of that is not taught in school. So when I interview students that want to work with us, and I'm happy to say that a lot of students want to work with us, and probably for other organizations as well that are doing this. But I ask them, do you have any field experience? And they say no. So, however, the good news, because they're just, I mean, I grew up at McGill we would take an entire morning and go bird watching. That was our class. Or we would do things in the pond and the arboretum. And that's not done anymore. So there's a lot of that missing. It obviously needs to be put back in, but I do have some good news to report. And that is that the last two students that I've hired have very much followed a technical education type thing, where they are doing a lot of the field field studies. And I met my last student bird watching on my street. So very passionate about nature.
That's excellent. Well, you certainly are leading the way, showing good example. So I don't know that we have very many other questions, really. If anyone wants to, oh, yes, you do, Rob, go ahead. We can hear you. You have to unmute yourself again. One more time. You did it once. There
Okay.
you go.
You mentioned that Sandy Beach probably qualifies as an exceptional forest ecosystem under the category of a shelter forest. But Why did you use, or you said could qualify? Why did you use the conditional? Why could? Does it or does it not qualify? How does one qualify such a forest?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So we can ask that it be considered as an EFE. These demands are submitted to the le ministère. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the ministère that is being. We submitted this request for Willowbrook in Hudson. And it's quite an easy process. We emailed the person that is in charge. It's not le ministère de la Forêt. It's not the MFFP.
Fonds des forêts?
No.
No? Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm going to look that up. For some reason, I'm blanking on that. But it is submitted, and they ask you a bunch of questions, and you have to kind of prove the fact that it is, because it's a shelter, because we found so many species at risk, and you have to prove that you followed the right protocol methodologies. And then they basically write back and say, yes, it's deemed an EFE. So
you're writing you're writing a unit within the Quebec Environment Ministry?
yes, correct. Yes.
Okay.
I'm sure we can get you that information. We can put you in touch. So, because I think Rob wants to follow up, right?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Good idea.
Rob, you have our report, right? That was written in
Oh yes, it's a very good report. I mean, in this letter that I wrote to the minister asking him to cancel the certificate of authorization. I mean, this was the basis of the letter, and it was widely cited and even more footnoted in that letter. So yes, I have that report.
Okay,
Thank you.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Because we do talk about EFEs. And I'm just wondering if we go into the details of how to apply for it. I'm forgetting.
I don't recall, but that doesn't mean it's not there.
Anyway, it is the MFFP. You were right, Dita. So that's no longer, I guess it's now le ministère des Ressources Naturelles. Is that it now?
So now
we can look into that. I can look into that, Rob.
Okay, thank you.
Linda's in the process of posting the EFE contact info.
Super
I
amazing.
don't know who is Linda, but maybe we'll see it soon. So Catherine from la Coalition des Terrains de Golf en Transition has posted question pour Campbell ou peut-être pour Isabelle. Sur les 11 études de biodiversité, les certificats d'autorisation ont été bloqués dans combien de cas? Campbell ou Isabelle?
Well, why don't I speak about, because the 11 of them were not all terra humana, so that would not be appropriate. That's actually a very interesting question, and that is that 2 of the biodiversity studies were done on Los Alorme, and they were used not to counter a certificate of authorization already issued, but they were instrumental, along with other studies that were commissioned, to prove to Projet Montréal that they should, in the upcoming election, municipal election, they should support the preservation of Los Alorme. So there was a biodiversity study, there was a connectivity study on Los Alorme and Pierrefonds. There was another, a pair of them done in the north sector of Sainte-Anne-de-Bellevue, and none of these were used to counter a certificate of authorization. And this is an illustration of why we're not just talking about using them with the Ministry of the Environment. They have a political purpose, and they serve that purpose. Those 4 of them served that purpose as far as the Projet Montréal was concerned, about making that a main plank in their election strategy that year, and it worked, and we see the result. For the others, 2 of them were done to counter certificates of, the validity of certificates of authorization, which had been issued by the minister to Technopark Montreal in order to justify its destruction of the Hubert Reeves area. We were not successful in those, but it was evidence that was produced before the court to try and counter the self-serving, again, if I could use that term, self-serving biodiversity and bird surveys that were done. We were not successful in that case, but again, I would say, though the battle for Technopark is far from over, the Green Coalition, with whom the Legacy Fund was working at that time, has and continues to use these as a very persuasive argument, both with the politicians and with the public, that this area should be preserved, despite what falsehoods might have been said. So I guess we're up to 6 there. I don't think the one on Saint-Joseph-du-Lac had its intended effect from a particular canceling of certificates of authorization are concerned. The other observation I'd make is that the utility of these things and these kinds of studies is multiplied by when they are done. If they're done early rather than late, it cost over $70,000 to lose the case for Technopark. That's a lot of money to spend on trying to reverse a certificate already issued and to try and get a judge to agree that it ought to be. Because if you'll pardon the expression, the judges tend to be chicken shit. And that's a technical term. It's a legal term, by the way. And so we find that you can spend a great deal of money trying to get a judge to reverse one of those. You can spend a lot less money at the beginning in order to get the facts out there. And so one of the initiatives of the Legacy Fund that we're still trying to get off the ground, which is difficult to get off the ground, I have to say, is to try and get some sort of an advanced warning system, an early warning system, using the publicly available information, such as it is, so that we can identify in advance where people are looking for certificates of authorization, so that we can notify people in the area that, look, are you aware of what's going on? Because they won't be. And very often the citizens won't know what's happening until the certificate of authorization has been issued on the basis of false information. And then they're looking at, how do we reverse this thing? You reverse it legally, you're going to spend a lot of money and probably not, it's probably not going to work. You're left with the public and you're left with petitioning the minister to do the right thing. But what we'd like to do in the Legacy Fund, and it's difficult because we don't have the cooperation of the minister on mining or scraping or whatever you want to call the website. What we would very much like to do, and if there's anybody out there who'd like to help with this project, it's just another project we have, is how do we find out what is being applied for sufficiently in advance that we can notify people or find out whether there are already people on the ground who are interested in saving that wetland or that beach or that woodland or wetland or whatever. And when we know that the application is being made, we should be in a position, if we're quick enough, to commission a study and present that to the minister and head it off at the pass before the certificate gets issued. That's, I think, one of the biggest issues we have here. It's very difficult to get the courts to reverse something. It's very difficult. Well, Rob, you've done quite a good job of getting the minister to reverse one of them, or at least to attempt to reverse one of them.
It's a question of getting in there before the certificate gets authorized.
Absolutely.
But also, maybe through access to information, but something we can definitely look into. Asking for access to information on a regular basis, like every month. Give us the applications this month, some kind of, accelerated sort of routine application. But the other thing is not all lands are subject to certificate of authorizations. And what occurred to me tonight really, and I'm thinking about the golf courses, is they may not need a certificate of authorization because there's no wetland and there's no this and there's no that, but it still could use a good biodiversity study, right? They could always use a biodiversity study to make the case.
Yeah, you may have trouble with that on a golf course.
Golf courses for sure. I understand.
I think another understanding that people have to have is that we're not just talking about saving our natural spaces because so many of them are gone. We need to go a little farther.
Yeah.
And that is that there's huge value for people in their neighborhood for having a golf course or renaturalizing or whatever's left. Stop destroying the good stuff, start preserving the stuff that's even marginal and improving it for people's health and welfare. And there's other ways to approach that as well.
Okay, so I see the time is 7:45. We did say that it was going to end at 7:30. Before I pass it on to Arrow to conclude and thank our speaker, if there's anyone else that wants to say something, now is your chance. If not,
I just wanted to say that there is a public register of these applications for CA. So if somebody would like to regularly access it, that is a way of finding out.
Yeah, so that's definitely something that we're interested in. But the public register may be too late. It might be,
it's a register of the application.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we take note of it, and so first I hear about it from Campbell, and I'm on the board, so I think we're learning things every day. Yes, Campbell.
Just a little addendum there, and that is that for a couple of years now, we've been trying to find a system that does an automatic scrape that actually works, so and we could make that on a public dashboard that people can actually consult. We have not succeeded in finding the people to do this for under $30,000. So if it is music to my ears to hear that what we really should have is someone who'd pay attention to it, and once a month or once every couple of weeks we'll go and see what's news there. That may be the best solution of all. And if there's such a person is there, Gareth, please let me know. Okay.
Okay, I'll think about it. It's quite a task to take on, but I suppose just doing it once a month wouldn't be that onerous.
Yeah, and you'd never know what gems you uncover, right?
Yes,
before they get destroyed. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I just wanted, sorry guys, I just wanted to pinpoint that I put the information for the NFTs. Yes.
I copied the chat. So we don't lose it. And I see that the person we contacted with the recent changes, Audric Turcotte, biologiste chargé de projet en conservation.
But I don't know if that's because it's no longer the MFFA that is managing this.
Okay, but these are all things, of course, that we need to follow up on. But I did copy the chat, so we'll have that. So without further ado, then I'm going to pass it on to Arrow, who's going to give us some closing remarks and thank yous. And je vous remercie beaucoup. Ça a été fort intéressant et toujours très intéressant de dialoguer avec toutes les personnes qui sont intéressées à cette cause si importante et si essentielle. Thank you very much, everyone. So, Arrow, to you. Thank you.
All right. Avant de conclure, je vais exprimer notre profonde gratitude à Isabelle, que je remercie d'avoir partagé ses connaissances avec nous tous. Dida, merci aussi d'avoir été notre modératrice et discutante pour ce webinaire. And once again, really, thank you all for coming to attend this webinar tonight. I do invite you to copy down the links we have in the chat and to visit our website at legacyfundenvironmental.org and that of terrahumanasolutions.com, and to follow us on social media. We would be nowhere without you guys. Let's carry this knowledge with us. Let's be ambassadors for our natural spaces, champions of biodiversity, and advocates for sustainability in our communities. Thank you again, everyone, and good night.
Merci.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Good night,
Merci.
everyone.
Thank you.